Hey, what's up, everybody? BDL44 coming at you with another video. All right, so we got a triple header of Game 5s headed our way today in the NBA. And, you know, I can't say that I've been following these series as closely as I normally would. I think the reality is for me that I'm a Laker fan. So, given the fact that I have skin in the race, you would think I'd pay more attention to the field, not less. But, um, yeah, no, that's not what's happening. I'm paying much more attention to my team, kind of what we got going on this season rather than what I did last year, as you guys already know. But what I can say is I want to kind of comment on the games, just give you a little bit of a commentary or what it is that I'm seeing or what it is I think or whatever. So that's what I'm going to do. All right, first game up, we're going to talk about is the Boston Celtics and the Atlanta Hawks. DeJounte Murray is suspended for this particular matchup. My thing on the Hawks has been rather upfront, centered. I like the Hawks bench and overall team strength. What I don't necessarily like is how the coach uses that team right now. They're not using certain players that I think should be used in this situation against a Boston Celtics team that is obviously very talented. You got to use everybody that's talented to beat them, and that's really what it comes down to. If you're the Hawks, maybe DeJounte coming out of the lineup will force you to lean on guys like Bogey a little more, maybe force you to play Griffin some, play, Johnson a little more. Getting those guys acclimated to what playoff basketball is about and utilizing what their strengths are, I think would have went a long way in defending this Boston Celtics team and scoring, doing everything you need to do against Boston. Because they have such fantastic skills players. They have such fantastic solidified closers, basically, that you're going to need to be able to throw multiple things at them. So I just didn't see that from Quinn Snyder this playoffs. And when you consider they already have some issues trying to get Trae Young to play a style that gets everyone else their looks and gets the most out of the team defensively, it's just very difficult for them to utilize their roster. So they need to do some construction remanagement. But they do have all of the assets necessary to make themselves pretty good. Now, they did trade away picks to get DeJounte, but DeJounte's a heck of a player. You definitely want him on your team. But I do see them doing something to shake loose some flexibility in the offseason. But as far as I can tell, this series should be over tonight. It's essentially why I'm talking about the offseason for the Hawks, because it's very difficult to see them actually winning this game going into Boston and essentially just taking a game 5 where the team that went to the Eastern Conference Finals last year, or the finals altogether, have a chance to close you out when you're undermanned so severely as they are without DeJounte. So even though the Hawks have an opportunity probably win the boards with their bigs, they always have the talent to throw at the Boston Celtics that can make them, a much better team than they've shown. But at the end of the day, in a one-game situation on the road, it's the Hawks, man. At the end of the day, it's hard to see them winning this particular matchup, unfortunately. Just like it was kind of hard to see them win the series. I thought they had the talent to upset the Boston Celtics, but it had to be utilized in a certain way in order for them to really get the most out of themselves. And I just don't think they had that in mind. They really didn't. So the Hawks didn't realize they were good enough to beat the Celtics. So they approached themselves like the Hawks and got beaten like the Hawks. But if they would have saw themselves as a full, deep basketball team that could really utilize everybody with combinations that could do all kinds of things, they leave opportunities on the table. That's what I see there. An opportunity there to really upset the Boston Celtics seems to be come and gone at this point, because you get to a game 5 situation, you're down 3-1 against Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, you're probably done. So that's what I think there. That should be over with. I expect Boston to take care of business. All right, next game up, we're talking about the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Denver Nuggets. Now that series is very, very interesting, because you would think the Denver Nuggets would have swept them away, but the Minnesota Timberwolves found a way to win Game 4 and extend this series. Problem is they lost Kyle Anderson to an eye contusion, and this is already a team who most definitely could not afford to lose that particular piece. He provides so much on both sides of the floor, especially with their continuity. He's just an everything man for the Minnesota Timberwolves, and somebody they can give 40 minutes and get consistent play from. He makes others better. You just can't afford to not have him out there, and I really do believe that now the Minnesota Timberwolves are probably down to legitimately about 6 contributors that can really help them. And so, given the fact, here we go again, now they're going to be asking some people in a closeout game to play ball when they haven't trusted those people all season long. That's really what it comes down to. People that they didn't necessarily ever want to see, they've had to play in tournament games and playoff games. And so this is why I tell teams, like, the data is here, man. I was just a little early to the party in regards to this philosophy. You got to use players in order to keep the guys that you really, really love and you really, really want to invest in healthy. Karl Towns, Rudy Gobert, Mike Conley, they need their backups to be really good. Kyle Anderson, all those guys, they need their backups to be really good. Because if they're not, and you have to call on those guys on a game like tonight, they're not going to have what they need to overcome, and they're going to get beat up. And so that's what I think is going to happen. They're down so much talent. Obviously, we know about the guys that have already been out for a while, McDaniels and Naz Reid. But now you remove Kyle Anderson, you just see them having to lean on some people that they don't want to play. You know what I mean? That's what it really comes down to. And you're asking guys like Taurean Prince and Jordan McLaughlin and Jalen Noel to just play bigger than they're able to show you or that they've even been asked to all season long. So that's why I'm of the mindset you incorporate those guys early. You get those guys used to playing. You play those young players that may be a little iffy. Or you send them to the G League and bring in some guys who can really help you, because this is why you don't allow yourself to let that happen. Couple rolled ankles, couple bad injuries, and your team is just completely nothing in the biggest games possible. So Anthony Edwards is doing his best Michael Jordan impression. I told you guys, this young fella is not looking at his career as anything less than a possible legendary process. You know what I mean? And so him having thrown away seasons with bad organizational decisions being made around him really is harmful to his overall path in the career that he has for himself. I don't look at this as a young player who, by the year 15, isn't judging himself by how many championships he's been able to compete for. Now, granted, collecting rings isn't as simple as I say it is or as it used to be back in the day. But the point is, he needs to be in playoff situation where he can display exactly how great he is. And this is how he's been able to do it in this series, with averaging over 30 points a game. And nobody's even paying attention because he's not on a team that has anybody down there, you know what I mean, worth watching. Let's just be honest. He's down there with Karl and Rudy, and that's fine. But he should be on a team where everybody can go, so that them 30 points can be impactful in a championship possibility situation. And he could be somebody competing for his first championship at 20 years old, 21, whatever he is. If he were in a really legitimate situation. And to me, it seems like the Minnesota Timberwolves tried to create that, but they went about it the absolute backwards way. And as a result, now he's in the opposite type of situation. Now they are a dead in the water franchise that needs to pick itself out of the nonsense, and it's probably going to need to trade him and everybody else on the team in order to get that value. And so they're not going to do that, but that's the situation they're in. And because of it, he doesn't have the path toward multiple championships in a Michael Jordan-like career while sitting there on that franchise. He's just not. He's going to be a fantastic shooting guard, but the path to legendary status isn't possible with that canvas. And those who pay attention to the NBA well enough know that. They're going to have to let go of valuable stuff to reset their situation or to put themselves in a position to build something like that. Then they got to get lucky enough to be able to attract something like that to Minnesota. It's just too much. It's why you don't mortgage your future when you're them, especially when you just bought the team and you got a young player like that you're supposed to be responsible for. It is misguided, and it's a death pill making a trade like that for Rudy Gobert. And ultimately, that's what they're being judged by. It's the fullness of what that trade is supposed to bring them. If Rudy can help them get to a championship, then all of this is fine. If he can be dominant enough to allow for Rudy Gobert, for Karl Towns and Anthony Edwards to display their best and it be good enough to win the championship, then the trade was justifiable. Problem is, that's not going to be possible. He's not going to be able to show that. That's not who he is. So now you're sitting there looking around at Anthony Edwards and you're telling him to go play with guys that can barely play, or telling him his backups are guys that can barely play in the biggest games. So, I think that this is a situation where the Minnesota Timberwolves are going home. You without Kyle Anderson, there's no way they're winning this game on the road in a closeout situation against Nikola Jokic and Porter and those guys. It's not happening. Murray is 100% healthy. The defense of Brown and KCP, all of this just makes it so that you can clearly see the Denver Nuggets are not going to be losing too many more games against the Minnesota Timberwolves. It's just not. They don't have enough. The fact that they've gotten this far, it speaks to how scrappy and how talented those players that they do have are. And it's a damn shame that they just don't have a full team there. Injuries bit them, but more so than anything else, that stupid trade bit them and depleted their entire franchise of excess flexibility, which would allow them to be as good as they want to be. So that's exactly what I see there. That's 2 down. I expect the fishing boat to meet both of those franchises today. And then, last but not least is the Clippers and the Suns. Another Game 5, another team down 3-1 from the Clippers. In this situation, I've already been on record saying I think the Clippers are going to win this basketball game. This particular basketball game, I think the Clippers win. They go back to Phoenix, and I think they're going to be scrappy enough to turn this into a really, really dog fight of a game, just like the series has been. It doesn't really matter if the Clippers have their starters or not because of the way they're constructed. They're meant to play basketball in such a way that allows for them to basically have enough, pieces and different elements to compete to win a basketball game in this league. So if PG and Kawhi ain't out there, they still got wings. They still got a center. They still got point guards. They still got shooters. You know what I mean? They still have everything that would otherwise make them give them a puncher's chance. So that's what I see. And then you couple that with Russell Westbrook, who if he's not hurting your team, he's putting infinite pressure on the rim at irrational speeds. And that's the best way I know how to describe it. After being a fan of the Lakers for 2 years and watching him be our point guard, because he's so fast and continuously fast, but not in a way that makes any sense, to be honest with you, it makes him a hell of an asset for a basketball team like that who doesn't have a star. You know what I mean? And if they have the other elements, which they do, which the Lakers didn't, then you can still win games because that pressure is going to create some live ball situations against those better players that they're not going to want to be part of. And then he's going to help them on a defensive end. And then it comes down to the other pieces being good enough to help complement him. And in some cases, they are. You look at a guy like Norman Powell can go for 40. You look at a guy like Nick Batum, who's hit 10 threes in this season. You've seen guys like Gordon hit big shots. Terrence Mann's capable of 30 points. Those are the type of things that if they're doing that around Westbrook, constantly running at the rim at that speed, constantly putting pressure on people to foul him and stop him from getting to the line, you have a situation where the Clippers can really genuinely compete in a game like this where the other team is only relying on 4 guys, and when they make certain substitution and rotations, the Clippers have advantages on the floor. They don't never have an advantage necessarily when KD and Booker are on the floor. But when those guys sit down, the Clippers bench is better, in my opinion, and more capable of competing together than Phoenix's bench in this situation. And then the Suns are so eccentric about shooting jumpers with Booker and KD. Fortunately enough, those are 2 of the best and efficient players in the world, so you can do that. But at the end of the day, if those guys are going cold for any reason, it can really expose that team and some of their weaknesses. Now, Ayton is a trump card. If he for some reason has a big game where he's going for massive amounts of points and rebounds, that can throw a monkey wrench in anybody's process, which is why they're such a dangerous team. Even if those guys are cold, if he starts to go, they can still win. But it's a situation where the ball is in too few people's hands because they only trust only so many to do so much. But with players like Torrey Craig playing well, Josh Okogie helping so much defensively, you know what I mean? You can see where the Suns are just getting over the hump in regards to their players, helping them come together for ultimately their goal. So for me, I'm just saying that the Clippers are going to stay alive because I've seen the Clippers be so scrappy in situations like this. And I do not believe in the Suns' overall sum of their parts. I do think the Clippers can compete with them, especially if they would have had their stars. But without their stars, I just think they have a puncher's chance. And in a game like this, with Russell Westbrook having the confidence he does and the team playing as well as it has, I give them this particular game. I'll say they'll get this series to 6 against the Suns team that I think is somewhat weak in their bench area particularly. But you can't take nothing away from Kevin Durant, who was 10 out of 11 in the last game, if I'm not mistaken. Devin Booker's averaged 27 points. You could clearly see where I'm coming from could easily be disputed in the data that we've seen. This is a very difficult team to stop, and when you're talking about closing someone out, the Suns will be embarrassed not to close a shorthanded Clipper team out at home. That's essentially what I'm saying to you. What I'm thinking is unprecedented, and the data ain't necessarily there for that. I'm just calling the Clippers a underdog upset type of thing here. Not necessarily because I see Booker and KD is incapable of closing out a short-handed Clipper team. So I just want to make that clear. But all in all, I think that's what's going to happen. I just think that's what's going to happen. I think the Clippers are going to win this game somehow and extend this series, get it back to LA where they'll probably get knocked off pretty easily in the game 6. But that's what I see happening there. So, yeah, man, 2 out of 3, I think we'll be going home tonight. The one that's probably more likely to go home, most likely to go home, is the Clippers in a lot of people's eyes because of how depleted they are. But I just think that Ty Lue has one more in him. Ty Lue and Russell Westbrook and Norman Powell and those guys, I think they got one more in them. And the Suns, I really do think are that weak. That's what it is. I really legitimately don't think they're that good of a team and probably can drop a game like this if for some reason the wrong people get in foul trouble or the wrong people go cold. You know? So that's my thing with the Suns. I just think that little of what they have, quite honestly. Another situation I want to talk about, even though tonight's game with the Boston Celtics and Atlanta Hawks will determine how possible this is. But I just think we're looking at a situation where it's more than likely the Boston Celtics are playing the Philadelphia 76ers in the second round. And I do think that that matchup is going to be, especially if Milwaukee somehow gets eliminated, that could be your Eastern Conference Finals in the sense that whoever comes out of it will probably be there. You know, even though I think so much of the New York Knicks, the Knicks would have to prove they can defeat those teams that have more experience over here with Boston and Philly if New York was able to get through Miami, which looks extremely likely to me, and past Cleveland since they're still in that series right there. But, you know, this is a situation where I look at the Boston Celtics and the Philadelphia 76ers, and I just say they're going to slug it out, man. And whoever's the healthiest team at the end of it likely will win. I do think the Celtics probably win the series. I just have some concerns about Philadelphia's, as usual, bench and players that they're ultimately going to be leaning on a situation that they'll need to. Joel Embiid's health is obviously everything in regards to this team. And this is why I look at the Eastern Conference and I say they're not as scary as the way this year's field will make them look. In other eras, the Eastern Conference is high. And the reason why I say that is because the teams that are at the top, they can't necessarily afford for their main guy to get removed from what their situation is. You look at what's going on in Milwaukee. They couldn't withstand a couple of games against a Miami Heat team without Giannis. I think kind of the same thing about Philadelphia. They're not going to last very long without Joel. If for some reason he's not available, they were lucky to beat the Brooklyn Nets in a game 4 that he did not play in for injury reasons. Luckily enough, this rest I think will get him to a point, especially if this Boston Celtics series extends for some reason, he will be healthy for the next series, unless what he has is going to be lingering like last year's injuries, which in that case, I don't like Philly as much. If for some reason Joel's injuries are going to carry over into this matchup against a healthy Robert Williams, obviously, you know who else is on that team as well, Al Horford, Jason Tatum, that front court, Grant Williams. Obviously, if he's 100%, you give him a very good shot at getting this thing as far as it needs to go, just off the strength that he's likely going to be your MVP. James Harden's playing fantastic. Tyrese Maxey's 100% healthy. These are things that make you feel real good about Philly. Picking up McDaniels. These are good pieces to have. The rise of Paul Reed. I think he's going to have a big playoffs going forward for the Philadelphia 76ers, the way he's been contributing off the bench. They just have a lot of good stuff there in Philly that makes you think this could be the year. However, the Doc Rivers effect. Y'all know I don't believe in him in the playoffs. That's real data. He be doing stuff they shouldn't do. And the second thing about that situation is just the overall wings position. When it really comes down to it, bucket for bucket, who is stopping Jaylen Brown on that Philadelphia 76ers team? James Harden. Is he going to be James Harden, or is he going to disappear like he tends to in the playoffs? Will his health be there? These are too many things. That's why James Harden's not a player I like to have on my team too often, because at the end of the day, no matter how great he is, I'm just waiting for him to do what he's always done, which is disappear. And because I expect him to disappear, it's almost like I'm hesitant to have confidence in the biggest moments and one of the best players, and that is a dynamic that I don't see over there in Boston. They don't have that problem. None of their players had that issue at all. I look over at Derek White. That dude is playing some of the best basketball of his career on both sides of the floor, which does not surprise me, because I told y'all when they first acquired him that he was like picking up another big player, making him a big three last year or four or whatever it was, because I thought that much of his talent. You put him next to Marcus Smart, and then you bring in Malcolm Brogdon, sixth man of the year. Congratulations to him for that. And it's like, you see it. You can clearly see where the Boston Celtics have a full basketball team. Now, granted, they do have some players on the back of the bench, et cetera, et cetera. You know what that is. But Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are going to be on the floor so much, and they're so likely to stay out there. Jason Tatum affects so much on both sides of the floor with his length, like a Brandon Ingram or a lengthy player like that, Kevin Durant, whatever. It's one of those things where he can affect so much till you love having him on the floor to do both. 40 minutes a game to stay on the floor, just do all kinds of stuff, and he's such a conditioned athlete. So he's going to give you that. He's going to break down the defense, and then he's going to provide defense. And if he's looking to pass the rock, he's a hell of a playmaker too. So I look at Jason Tatum, I just say, if Joel ain't 100% healthy, and some of those players on Philadelphia and their coach does what they're prone to do, then you're likely to see the Celtics take that series out in 6. And so that's what I'm leaning on. I'm gonna say that. Even though I've liked Philadelphia, I'm a big Joel guy this year. I think he's that dominant. But when I look at that Celtics team, I just have less questions about them. Even though Doc Rivers is going against a rookie coach, I just don't trust Doc when it comes down to big moments. I've seen him mess up more than I've seen him succeed. I've seen him blow big old 3-1 leads more than once. Sometimes the rotations, every year I have a problem with what I see down there with Doc. I've talked about it every year when I see it. And so I'm just poised to see the more of the same take place. I believe in tendencies, and that data is real to me. So that's why I'm like, Boston, I just don't see too many chinks in their armor as it pertains to this series, especially if Robert Williams is 100% healthy. He's going to create enough problems to make Joel's life miserable. Even though he's going to get his numbers, Joel's still going to average over 28 points in this series. It's not going to be as easy to get second chance points. It's not going to be as easy to get buckets. He is going to be dealing with a monster defensively. And we see how that goes for Anthony Davis over there in LA, going against Jaren Jackson, and how that can make a great player look lesser than himself and just overall murk up every game he's in. And so when I look at Philly, I say, is Harden going to be himself? Is Maxey going to average over 30? If Maxey averages over 30, if he can take steps forward and be who it is they want James Harden to be, you can see situations where maybe they'll win some games if Joel's not available. See, that's what is key to me. If anybody in this series gets injured, for example, if Jason Tatum goes down this series, I think Philly wins the series. I think it immediately leans into a situation where you don't have enough going up against Joel. If Joel goes down, that's the kind of thing. It's like, who's going to stay most healthy in the series? Can everybody who needs to be down there stay down there? And if so, this thing can go the distance. This can go the distance. But these two teams are going to be fighting each other tooth and nail. Nobody's giving nothing up. I expect it to be a very physical series. And because of it, I expect guys to miss some time. Foul trouble is going to be a real thing. Defense is going to be a real thing. And I look at the Boston Celtics as potentially just a better overall, more capable defensive team. So that's ultimately what it comes down to for me. If that series manifests, which you still have to see what Atlanta does, that's what I see there. I see Boston in 6 in that particular matchup. So that's really what it is, man. I hope Milwaukee actually does get beat by Miami before I, get out of here and go get some food in my system. I wanted to say to you guys, I really do hope Miami wins the series because I do think it makes for a much more fun Eastern Conference when you throw a big monkey wrench like that into the situation. Everybody and their grandma thought the Bucks was going to win the championship. Maybe they still do. I'm not ready to rule them out of the series at all because I think they're going to be favored in Game 5. Or whether what is it? It's a 3-1 situation. Yeah, so I think they're favored in Game 5 to win that. If they go back home, Game 6, they'll be favored to win that. And then in Game 7, nobody's going to be mad at Miami for dropping that game because ultimately they have Giannis, man. So, if ever there was a 3-1 lead that you expect a team to blow, it's Miami blowing this particular 3-1 lead. However, you don't win 3 games against another team without having certain advantages that come to you in certain positional circumstances or certain strategic circumstances that have been glaring enough for you to win these basketball games. It ain't just Giannis being removed because Giannis has been on the floor for some of this stuff. He was on the floor for Game 4. Played pretty solid. Did not matter. And so I think Miami's figured some things out schematically against the Bucks that may be working. And if that's the case, Giannis is going to have to go crazy in order to bust that up. Now, this is an NBA championship team. A lot of these guys are NBA, they've all won it together. But I just look at them and say that some of that talent on their roster, and I've said this about Milwaukee, they did some things and picked up some players that I think might be a little overrated in regards to their cachet and what it is they can bring to the table. And because of it, they don't have as much talent as people think they do. They skated a little bit in some ways because they had Giannis. And some of them dudes ain't going to be able to help you as much. And I think that's kind of what's going on there. And with Giannis being out, they've had to sub in some people that maybe they don't want to play. Maybe they didn't really develop and all that kind of stuff. Maybe guys are just a little old, a little done, that kind of thing. And this is why I got on them. I'm like, look, y'all skating. Y'all playing around with roster spots. You're not, bringing in Jay Crowder and all these guys. I know people love Jay Crowder, but I'm like, you need to have a young player in that situation. That should be Beauchamp. Wigington should be developing. These type of things. I'm looking at in Milwaukee. I'm like, yo, this is why it's not working. Because you're not developing the players around Giannis in a way that respects that he needs to have teammates that can go. It can't just be his top 6 that can go. Because those 6 are going to have to stay healthy. And so, here we go again. Talking about Middleton. He wears down. What you asking Drew Holiday to go for 50 every night? Like, that's what it takes for Milwaukee to win these games. And I remember a distinctive situation where they had that back-to-back against Pacers. I've always brought it up. It's a cautionary tale to not take back-to-backs lightly, especially when the second game is a more important one. They played Indiana, had to go 50 for Drew Holiday kind of thing. Game score was all the way up to like in the 120s. And then the very next night, Boston came in there and blew them out heavily, almost by 50 points. And it's one of those situations where that showed me right there that there's some things wrong with Milwaukee structurally that tethers so much on them being 100%, and with them not being 100%, you can see how easy it was for them to be defeated. That tells me that even with Giannis, they can very easily be defeated. Simply put, they're not as good as we thought they were, and that's why they're down 3-1, not necessarily because Giannis is out. It's because they couldn't win without him. And so what I'm telling you is when you go in the playoffs and a team has a chance to scheme against you a million times, that's kind of what's being exploited. Fantastic coach Eric Spoelstra exploiting all of those different holes in Miami's weaknesses are just glaring at this point. And I don't know that they win this series at all. Is essentially what I'm saying to you. I think the chances Miami wins one of these next 3 games are extremely high. Extremely high. And I think Milwaukee's going home. Because tendencies are real. Giannis is not 100%, and he's going to have to play in all of these games at a very high level in order for them to win. He's going to, like I said, I think he's going to get Game 5, maybe even gets Game 6. But one of these games, the data that we've seen, the tendencies that the Milwaukee Bucks appear to have shown the Miami Heat are going to continue to be there in these games that Giannis is either there in or not. So for me, I just expect more of the same. And I think Miami's serious. I think they've been able to weather the storm without Tyler Hero much better than they've been able to manage themselves without Giannis. And we're seeing it. We're seeing the weakness in the Milwaukee Bucks unravel before our very eyes. They're being exposed right now, in my opinion. And so that's what I want to tell people. I don't think Milwaukee's going to be very strong going forward if they do win the series. that they show me that they're not where they need to be as a roster to really compete with some of the best teams. And I'm not afraid of them. I'm telling you as a Laker fan that I am not afraid of Milwaukee anymore. If I ever was, not at all. Because their bench isn't strong. I'm not going to say it's weak. It's not Cleveland weak, but it isn't strong. And that's the problem. They need Portis. They need some of these other guys, everybody on the team, to just play at a high level every single night in order to compete. They can't have drop games by Javon Carter. He has to be special every night, and that's just not happening. So, yeah. That's what I see there. That's exactly what I see there. Maybe we'll talk about what happens with the Knicks and the Heat later on if that were to manifest. So that's what I have for you guys. It's my little NBA chat for this particular day. It's time to eat some food. My name is BDO44. I'll thank you all for watching. Bye.